And we are back. Welcome back to the Premier League predictions series on the channel. And a massive thank you again for now helping me reach 450 subscribers. The next milestone is a massive one in being 500. So if you are not subscribed, help me reach 500 subscribers by hitting that button below. And as always, drop a like on the video if you enjoy these series. And what a week it has been. Off the pitch in terms of Premier League, massive managerial changes. Roy Hodgson is the Crystal Palace manager once again and will become the oldest Premier League manager once again at 75 when he takes charge of Crystal Palace this weekend. Antonio Conte has also left Tottenham. They are not going to replace him before the end of the season. It looks like Julian Nagelsmann will be the favourite after he was horrendously sacked by Bayern Munich, in my opinion. How will all of that play into this weekend's fixtures? You are about to find out. And not only that, due to the internationals, we have had a whole host of big name potential injuries. So I'm trying to put all of that into perspective when I do these predictions. And now we're going to find out what I have gone for. And we start with probably the biggest game of the weekend, which is, of course, Manchester City and Liverpool, the early kickoff this weekend. And speaking of big name injuries, it looks like Erling Haaland is set to miss this one for Manchester City. He picked up a groin injury for Norway in training ahead of their first game. He didn't even play in the international break, but he went home with a groin injury. He didn't train for Manchester City yesterday, meaning that he's only really got today to get himself fit for this one. So I don't think he's going to make it. Does that really affect Manchester City? No, in my opinion. Julian Alvarez is a phenomenal striker, and I think he actually suits Manchester City's style of play better than Haaland does, even if he may not be as quite prolific in front of goal. As for the game itself, I think Manchester City should win this game, but Pep Guardiola always tends to give Liverpool a little bit too much respect. We saw that earlier in the season, both in the Charity Shield and in the game at Anfield, so I don't think this is going to be a runaway win for Manchester City. I'd love to see them do it because of what Liverpool did to us. But I'm just going to go for a bog standard 2-1 to Manchester City. I know I've gone for some crazy scorelines in this fixture before, but to be honest, this is all I see happening. I see Manchester City just edging out a pretty even game. Next up, we have the 3 o'clocks, and we start with Arsenal and Leeds. And speaking of teams with international injuries, Leeds were absolutely decimated in this international break. So given the fact that Arsenal basically didn't pick up a single injury, they're top of the league and they're absolutely flying. Leeds are already struggling and have now picked up a fair few injuries. I'm just going to go for a heavy Arsenal win. I'm going to go for 4-0. The last time I went for a scoreline like that, it took a 98th minute winner for Arsenal to beat Bournemouth. So we'll see what happens this time, but I expect Arsenal to take this one pretty comfortably. Speaking of Bournemouth, they are at home to Fulham, and I think this is going to be a really interesting one. Bournemouth have looked much better in the last few weeks. Their January signings have started to play more regularly and started to put in some fairly decent performances, whereas Fulham have just sort of dropped off a smidge in the last couple of games. They were very good against Manchester United until that capitulation of red cards. Those players and the manager are, of course, suspended from this one. So I don't really feel like I'm in a good enough position to say Fulham take the win in this one. I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw. I think all possibilities are available for this one. But right now, I can't really split them. Hence the 2-2. Next up, we have Brighton and Brentford. And let's be honest, I think as good as Brentford have been this season, Brighton have just been so much better. They're playing the best football in the Premier League, in my opinion, right now, in terms of on-the-ball movement and just all-round brilliance. I'm going to go for 3-0 to Brighton. I don't think I need to say too much more about that one. I would really like to see them make that real push for Champions League places because I feel like they deserve it the way they've been playing. Next up, it is Roy Hodgson's return to Crystal Palace as they take on Leicester, who have, of course, been struggling very much themselves in recent times. Do I think the new manager pomp is going to be enough to get Crystal Palace their first win of 2023? No, I don't. I think it's going to be a tight game. I think it's going to be a 1-1 draw. I think Roy Hodgson will want to implore that more defensive outlook to Crystal Palace. That said, they haven't been scoring goals, so it's a very weird situation they've kind of put themselves in. But I think Leicester are still good enough to get at least a point at Selhurst this weekend. Next is Nottingham Forest taking on Wolves, and again, I have to go to Nottingham Forest's home form and say they are a very good side at home. And Wolves have really been struggling themselves recently in terms of goal scoring, like we said about Crystal Palace a moment ago. I expect Nottingham Forest to get the home win. I'm going to go for 2-0 to Nottingham Forest in that one. Slight potential concerns over Brennan Johnson in terms of potential international injury for him, but I think he is going to be fit enough to make this game, and I'm going to go for 2-0. The final game on Saturday, the evening game, sees Chelsea taking on Aston Villa. Matty Cash was confirmed to be injured from international duty by Unai Emery yesterday. Doesn't look like Chelsea have picked up any fresh injury concerns this weekend, so I expect them to be at relatively full strength. And the way that they've played the last couple of weeks prior to the international break, I would be expecting them to beat Aston Villa. I'm going to go for 3-1, purely because I just think Ollie Watkins' goal-scoring run is probably going to continue. He's on such good form. I can still see him picking up a goal. But at the end of the day, I think Chelsea will end up taking this one relatively comfortably. And I think 3-1 is just about the fair score. On to Sunday, and the early kickoff sees West Ham taking on Southampton. Two sides, once again, with very varied form recently. It all kind of depends which side turns up on the day. So with that said, I do think all three possibilities are available here. But I have to go for what I think is the most likely situation, which is West Ham taking the win. I'm going to go for 2-1 to the Hammers in this one. On to my club, Manchester United, and it's a repeat of the Carabao Cup final. Since the Carabao Cup final, Newcastle have played much better, and in my opinion, Manchester United haven't been particularly great. So I have to admit, I am very concerned going to St James's Park this weekend, and I'll be honest, I'm not confident enough to predict that Manchester United are going to get the win. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. I think Newcastle could very easily take this game as well, by the way. I think we've not looked the best offensively recently. Newcastle still have one of, if not the best defensive record in the league. And offensively, since the return of Isak, Newcastle themselves have looked a lot more dangerous. So I honestly think a Manchester United win is probably the least likely scenario this weekend as it stands right now. But I'm not going to predict my team to lose a game that we basically won a few weeks ago. So I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. Hopefully Manchester United, should I say, have enough to get the job done. But I'm just not quite confident enough so far this weekend. And finally, we have the Monday Night Football, which is Everton taking on Spurs. And it is, of course, the first game since Antonio Conte left. I think it's Spalletti, something like that. I can never say the guy's name. He will be taking in charge instead until the end of the season. And it's an interesting one because Everton's home record under Sean Dyche has been fantastic, but at the same time, these Tottenham players, off the back of what Antonio Conte said about their attitude towards matches, have to show more effort and more running. So if they don't get the win here, it just proves Antonio Conte was right. So I'm expecting Spurs to put in the performance necessary to get the result against a team that is in a relegation fight right now, as Tottenham themselves are in a massive race for the top four. So what I'm going to go for is a 2-0 win for Tottenham. And that will round off part one of these predictions. I will be back on Tuesday to do the rest of it. It is, of course, a double game week. There are 6 more games being played on Tuesday and Wednesday. So I will be back with the second part of my predictions on Tuesday morning. As always, let me know down in the comments your thoughts on my predictions, your predictions as well as your thoughts on all the other things this week around the managerial shuffle. Should international breaks be put in the middle of the season, given how many top names come back from it injured? Thank you very much for watching. As always, I'll be back on Sunday evening for my reaction to the Newcastle-Manchester United game.